What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, where you are, and whatever time it is, and welcome back to yet another video with your man, Immersiaholic. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 4 of my head-to-head campaign as the Lusitani taking on my man Toxborg, who's playing as the Nervii, of course, for DEI in Rome 2. Now, in our last episode, we dealt with some of the final Iberian tribes in Iberia. However, there is still one more major contender who we have to deal with, and that is, of course, the Arevaci. In our last episode, they came out of the woodwork, drove into our armies, and smashed us, although we did end up winning in the end. But now things are looking a little bit desperate. To the south here at Ep.4, we're looking to try and maintain a very stalwart but desperate defense down there, as we don't have many units in the area. And to the north, things are looking okay. We do have a fairly battered Arevaci army up here that we need to be careful of. But once we take them out, we'll then be able to move on down south into Numantia. Hopefully we can do that before the Arevaci march on Ep.4. And then once we do that, all of Iberia is ours. Just about, except Carthage's holdings and a couple little cities on the far northeast side. So of course we begin by re-establishing our army, reorganizing it. We're merging a lot of our destroyed units, especially these Lusitani light infantry units. They come from the freedman social class, so they're pretty easily replaced. Not too much of a big deal. And of course we're trying to use our mercenary Polarics and some other AOR units that come from the foreigner population. Now we'll get a bit of a closer look at later. However, there is no rest for the wicked, and the Arevaci are attacking Ep.4. This has happened just as we've had a general arrive with a couple of mercenary units, but unfortunately, besides that, the garrison is very undertrained, very small in number, and just not prepared for this very massive and elite Arevaci army that's marching down on the village. Here we are on the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. The town, city, village, whatever you want to call it, of Ep.4 is about to be ravaged. We've set up defenses all the way around, though. But, like I said at the beginning of this battle, our troop quality is very, very low. We have basically just a very bare-bones 12-unit garrison here, plus some mercenary units in a general. But getting an overhead view, just to show you guys my defensive options. On the north side, we have our slingers looking north to the open fields, looking to cut down any infantry that come towards them. We basically have this long kind of triangle shape, almost island in the middle of town, and that's where we're making our last final stand, and that's where our victory point is. We have two entrances marked by the green lines where we have men and traps and barricades stationed. On the south side of town, we have 4 units total, fairly spread out, so it's basically a 2-and-2 setup on 2 of the major entrances of the south. We have no idea where the Arevaci will be coming at us from, but for the tighter corridors, we do have our traps set up there. And then the same kind of deal is on the north side. We have basically 2 units with a few more in reserve on top of our little final stand hill there. And we have more traps as well to the north along the major road. And then we have some more barricades to the west to slow down any advance coming from that direction. Way far to the west, we have some units out of town trying to hide out and hopefully flank north or flank south around the enemy as they came in and attacked the town. But however, those yellow units that you can see on the screen are actually the enemy, so this has gone terribly wrong. And you see it right here now. Our units that we sent out of the village to try and ambush the enemy are getting ambushed themselves, so this is a terrible start to the battle. We basically throw away all of our swordsmen here. We do kill a lot of the enemy, but it's basic low-tier units of the enemy here, so it's nothing too special. We'll see how that goes later. In the meantime, on the north side of town, we're seeing the main contingent of the Arevaci assault come down the main streets, which is good because that's where we have a lot of our traps, so hopefully that will help us out. They're also coming in from the northwest over there, you can see to the far right. Here, though, on the eastern side of town, we had another unit that was stationed outside of the village to try and ambush enemy units, but it itself was also ambushed, probably because of the guerrilla deployment the Arevaci units get. And so we're going to try and rush off the hill on the eastern side and try and push out and support those units. And if we can do that, maybe we can then use our whole eastern division of units to flank around and attack the units on the north side. And here they come now down the main street right now. They crash into our front line. We have javelins pouring in over them. Our slingers will also be getting involved momentarily. So we're getting a lot of kills for free, but these guys are Arevaci champions. You can tell by their small shield and sword and their just general uniform. The Arevaci champions are going to be very, very devastating to our militia units. In the meantime, though, our units on the far west side have been annihilated. We have only one unit left, so we're trying to pull it away to the south. Unlikely it will get away, but if it can pull some enemy units away, that will help. In the meantime, though, we have a small entrance on the western side of town, and it is now being pushed. But thankfully, the south side wasn't pushed whatsoever, so we're going to try and reorganize a new battle line up here with our southern units. Meanwhile, back to the east, we're now pushing out further away from the hill, but more Arevaci units have come in from the eastern side. Unfortunately, these guys are also very well equipped and very well trained. They have a lot of veteran spearmen, and they're being devastating towards us. In the meantime, our slingers on the hill are starting to get some free kills. The angle is a little bit rough though, and there will be some friendly fire, but as long as we manage to hold down the enemy in this formation and keep them stuck, it might give us the advantage we need. Who knows? This is looking super tight still. This battle could go either way. However, our main battle line on that main street is starting to get really worn down, so now we have to move forward our general to basically cover our hill and make sure our slingers do not get charged. They are throwing in their slings just over here. You can see here I turned on the trails. If you want to see that in future videos, let me know. But judging based off the trail markers, you can see we're trying to focus fire on the elite units of the Arevaci. Maybe not the best unit we could have targeted, but I just wanted to do as much damage to the elite units as I could because I felt like we weren't going to win this battle, and it's really starting to look like it now with this outflank on our main battle line. On the eastern side, things are continuing to deteriorate. The Arevaci did lose a couple units, but we've lost a couple, and although we're outflanking them here, this unit will actually end up winning that fight. So the eastern side is basically failing. It's just falling a little bit slower than the western side did. But here you can see the veteran spearmen are dealing absolute severe damage. But now our slings have run out of ammunition, so it's time to rush them into the battle, try and hold the enemy, just basically form a massive clump that the enemy has to grind through. The longer they have to grind, the more kills we'll hopefully get. The battle rages on for some time with very little maneuvers happening. It's basically a grind in the center of town on the main street and on the eastern side, although the eastern side is basically on the verge of falling. And we're seeing it here. We have only a couple units left over there. One of them's wavering, the others will be following in suit shortly, and because of that the Arevaci are now able to outflank our main battle line entirely. They're coming over the hill and they will charge into the rear of our main battle line, and that's basically where the battle ends, ladies and gentlemen. Battle replay cut it short a little bit by about a minute, but the enemy army didn't even need to charge into the rear of our main battle line. All they did was get close and our units routed. So we actually lose the city of Aplasia. There we have it, a close defeat. Here's the stats if you want to see them briefly, but there isn't really too much to see other than the majority of the Arevaci army did fantastic. Their elite spearmen in particular got a lot of kills for very little cost, so that's very concerning for us. We'll have to take note of that moving forward. This is our first major defeat in the campaign. We lose a general, we also lose a town in the same process. So overall, this is actually a very serious loss, and it shows that we are not the invincible Iberians that we once thought we were. But now, we basically have to rely entirely on our northern army to hurry the hell up, take the Mantia, and come down and take Aplasia. Because if we don't, the army at Aplasia could come all the way west to our capital, or it could march south and take Khartoum. But they can basically do whatever they want, which is absolutely not what we want them to be able to do. So we're going to have to try and reorganize our army to deal with those elite spearmen the Arevaci were throwing our way in such massive numbers. In the next turn, though, we have a rebellion, of course. We haven't actually had many rebellions. Generally speaking, this campaign's been pretty chill in terms of public order and internal management. Not a lot has happened, which is why I haven't done an economic overview yet, but I'll probably do one in one of the next couple upcoming videos, just to give you guys a brief overview of our political and realm situation, at least civilly speaking. Our major northern army continues its march against the Arevaci. We're going to just auto-resolve them away. Definitely not going to fight that Mangling and give my man Toxborg a way to get an easy kill on my general or something. In saying that though, my general is actually getting really damaged, so shortly here I'll be actually replacing him with a different general. We're about to march on Numantia though. It's looking like the city is now open for the taking. They have a smallish garrison. We send in the army. The garrison is a little bit bigger than what I was expecting, but our units are better, and it's easily a win for us, or it should be a win for us. We did end up fighting the battle manually, but I won't bother showing it to you just because it's not really necessary. We have another awesome battle coming up soon anyway. That was also a town assault, although in both instances the enemy AI sallied out. But something for you to remember is that every battle I'm fighting here is against a player. That player is my man Toxborg. Link will be down below to his point of view of this campaign and series. But whenever either of us fight, we play those battles ourselves. So I play battles when he's fighting as Nervii and vice versa right here. We get a decisive victory. We didn't really take too many losses except on a caveat and some of our low tier swordsmen, so easily replaced, no big deal. Now we move one step closer to wiping out the Arevaci. Before we continue, we once again reorganize our units, try to merge them. We definitely don't want to be letting our units that are very expensive sit around with just like 8 men in the unit, and that usually happens with cavalry. Unfortunately, the town is not very good because it's made entirely out of military buildings, but it does mean we were able to quickly replenish our units. So our northern army will continue its march south and try to take the city of Aplasia back into Lusitani hands. Now the Arevaci army is still inside of the city, and they're trying to recruit a new one outside of it, so we got to be careful of that. And then the garrison is slowly being replenished over time. I tried to consider my options here on how I could take the city, and after a while of debating it, I decided to try and move our army close, set it in an ambush stance, and then leave it and hope that the Arevaci army comes towards us. However, that was super risky because there was two main roads that went south and west into my territory that the Arevaci could have went and easily taken a town in a single turn. So at the end of the day, I decided against it. Probably not the best call or the safest call, but winter is coming and we need to take Aplasia back urgently. Otherwise, we could lose our capital and who knows what else. So here we are now with a massive upcoming battle under Lusitani, finally hoping to wipe out the Arevaci. Let's do it, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are on the battlefield. We have basically a massive mountain for this battlefield that we're fighting on. So I'm going to be moving down. You see these red arrows here? They signify basically the way the hill runs. So it's running away from the camera right now. However, this blue line is a ridge that the enemy is occupying. Remember, this is a player we're going up against right here, and he knows that this ridge is going to be very useful and basically give him the hill advantage, even though I'm the one who was on top of the mountain. So it's a very, very cool little terrain feature. Definitely gives him a massive advantage right here, so we're going to be trying to just go around it. We're going to be swinging around to this western side here, and we'll be following these red arrows down the ridge, but we'll actually manage to maintain the high ground against the Arevaci, which should give us a very deciding advantage against them. You can see even down here, the hill is still fairly steep, so as long as we can move forward without being contested, we'll still have a very good defensive position against them. We end up forming up our battle line as they form up two of theirs, basically splitting their army up into two, kinda, with some units along the ridge line, along with their skirmishers. They have a large slinger contingent, so we're gonna have to focus on that with our slingers. And that's what we're doing right here. You can see our slingers are now ringing out their shots. And with the trail markers on, it's a little bit easier to see now. We're focus firing the hell out of the enemy slingers. It's gone very well so far. It's a very good tactic when you have the Balearics. Use their range. 215 range is insane. Very, very useful. You can see it's working perfectly right here. And as the enemy begins to lose their slingers due to basically no benefit to them, the entire enemy Arevaci army begins pushing up the hill directly into our main battle line. So now that battle is truly beginning. We even managed to get downhill charges on most of the enemy units, but not all of them due to my bad micro. But I am doing my best here, so we'll get some very nice solid charges that'll help give us a very handy advantage. At least hopefully it will. But we'll have to see. Our units are not very good in quality. We have some good numbers and they are relatively professional, but the Arevaci army is mixed up of about half of its army being of elite tier units, elite spearmen especially, and some elite swords, so it's very risky. On the far southern side down here, we're having some issues where we've now created a massive hole in our main battle line. So sent down one unit right here to try and stop it and plug the hole, but the Arevaci send in a unit to try and tie us down, and there's still a major hole on our right hand flank, so that's very scary for us. We're going to have to try and deal with that somehow very quickly. The battle rages on, and you can see all of our units are entirely engaged. In the distance, you can see the line goes up over the hill where we do have the advantage up there, but down here on the flat plain, we don't really have an advantage, and it's actually going worse because they're able to outflank us so easily right here. They're punching a hole through our right flank, and although we're kind of outflanking them with our general's cavalry, it's not really going fast enough. Their spearmen are taking those rear charges way too well. Back towards the center here, we're getting some mixed results. Initially in this first blue circle, we're seeing some bad things happening, but then in the rear, we're actually wiping out their slingers, and then in the center, a little bit further up, we're holding them steadily. But now, back up towards the enemy general, we're having another hole form in our main battle line. So we're getting basically mixed results across our entire main battle line. Now the enemy general and cavalry can punch through our main battle line and do whatever they want. And we'll start to see that with the enemy general chasing down our slingers. Quite literally, he's running right towards them. Although this was actually a little bit of a mismanagement of micro here, where the enemy general actually didn't charge into my slingers. At least it seems like he didn't. He kind of just ran into him by accident by the looks of it. However, shortly after this, the rest of my slingers are busy engaging some of the enemy units that will be hitting them in the side because they're trying to outflank us. So hopefully that will help us out up there. Back on the south side, things are still looking very, very mixed. We've managed to kill a few of the enemy units, but they still have some very strong and stalwart defense going on over here. We're trying to cycle our cavalry in and out, in and out. You can see the targets of my cavalry right there with the red line. So basically showing you directly how they're going to charge. And here comes the charge right now. Devastating work. Our cavalry is good, but it's not the shock cavalry of the east, and it's not the high quality of the Greeks. So these charges, while they're strong and powerful and helpful, they aren't really going to get us all that many kills, nor even all that many routes, just because of how high tier the enemy spearmen are. In this center, we actually are winning right there, but we're also starting to take some heavy losses. We're getting a lot of waivers across a lot of our main battle line right now, so this is looking super scary, especially up here on the north side, up on the hill. We have another unit of cav, but that cavalry is basically on its own, as all of the infantry on our northern battle line edge now completely rout. So it's now time to pull back, set up some extra layers of defense with our slingers and infantry after we manage to free our right hand flank. However, even with these charges, the enemy infantry are just refusing to rout. They're absolutely stubborn. It's taking so long to get them just to waver, let alone rout. But after that little click, ladies and gentlemen, we actually had an issue with the battle replay. So what you're seeing now is actually live footage of me trying to micromanage the battle, whereas before it was about a replay where we could get some nicer shots. So forgive me for the bad camera angles here. I wasn't expecting to use this footage, which is why I actually didn't get any shots. But what you can see is basically the end of the battle happening here. We only have a few minutes left, and you can see why. The majority of our army has routed. We do have the cavalry advantage, but the majority of his units that are left are elite spearmen. They can take those rear charges and they can handle them just fine. And unfortunately, our swordsmen are very weak, and they're getting really demoralized because of how much of our army is already routed. We're trying to get our general involved as well. It's not going too well. He's starting to take some fairly heavy losses. Our other cavalry have now run down to about half strength. Our slingers are now completely stuck in a melee. And even though you can see I'm trying to micromanage my cav to get him out and recharge him back in, the enemy infantry is actually chasing them down, making the rear charges even less effective than what they otherwise would be. We're trying to focus on recharging his general as well, but he has that spear unit floating behind the general that's making it impossible for us to commit to a recharge there. So we're going to try and do one last final cav charge into the rear of some of his infantry right here. And while it is a very excellent rear charge, it's even slightly downhill, which does help us. Our infantry are just wavering way too heavily. We get a rout here on the right hand side, and then as soon as our rout happens, we get a bunch of them all routing at once. And now with that, ladies and gentlemen, all of our infantry is basically off the board. We have our slingers making a final last stand with our cavalry here. They're trying to hold on, but they're just wavering, and with all of our cavalry already being really decimated, there's just absolutely no way we can bring this back. And even though we're trying, and we're going down swinging, ladies and gentlemen, we actually lost this battle. Those wavers turn into routs, and as soon as those infantry rout, the entire army is now shattered and fleeing off the battlefield. We actually lose the assault on Iberia, ladies and gentlemen. And here are these statistics if you wish to see them. As you can see, we did serious damage to the enemy army, so this isn't the worst defeat that we've ever suffered, although it kind of is at the same time. We basically have lost most of our main battle line, most of our main army, but we can retreat, reorganize, and hire some mercenaries pretty quickly, so we won't lose the entire army, but obviously we're taking some pretty heavy casualties. This is one of our worst defeats, actually. But it doesn't mean that the Arevaci will win, because their army got decimated as well. So now they don't have enough men to assault any of our towns. They're going to have to spend basically the next 6 months or so trying to recover their army. And we can easily beat them in replenishment because we have friendly towns nearby. So we'll fall back, regroup, reorganize, hire some mercenaries, hire some just new AOR and basic units, get us enough to go assault the city again, and then we will actually just auto-resolve it next time so we don't end up losing to the good online PvP skills of my man Toxborg. He played that battle beautifully. He really screwed me there. GG to him.
Are we to have trade?
While we're recovering our army, though, we're finally getting a little bit more happening with diplomacy. The Lusitani of the East are now willing to give us some trade. We do go back and forth on what kind of demands we expect because, you know, we are obviously the superpower of Iberia. But the Lusitani are willing, and they're hopefully going to become a good ally to us. Meanwhile, our expedition to the east is going well. We've found a few colonies along Italy and Greece. Most of them are fairly friendly. However, some of these more pompous kind of Greeks we're finding are not willing to trade with us whatsoever. The people of Athens, Rhodes, Pergamon, and the Ptolemies of Egypt are all refusing any diplomatic relations with us. Although eventually Rhodes gave us a non-aggression pact. But that's basically it. Our expedition into the east to find allies against Carthage and Rome, who is becoming a juggernaut, is not going too well. After a couple turns of negotiating, the Rhodes actually came around and also accepted to have trade with us, but it did take a lot of back and forth, man. We were arguing with them for quite a while. And back up in Gaul, though, we have no diplomatic relations with anyone, really. The Iceni are also refusing our offers of trade and non-aggression, which is very frustrating because they're right now the major enemy against Gallia or the Nervii, aka Toxborg. So it would have been really helpful if we could have had them as allies. But instead, what we get, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Your man Emergaholic did some pretty sick diplomacy right here. And we got Massalia as an ally. Massalia is becoming a juggernaut faction. They're quite powerful right now, but not as powerful as they usually get. So this, to me, is a good sign that Massalia will be a massive help to whoever who wants to control Gaul. And of course, Gaul will be the major point where we'll be fighting the Nervii very soon. So getting Massalia as an ally will hopefully help us out in the long run. And after some negotiation and back and forth, and we offered manpower and support for their current wars, they accepted it. Meanwhile, we actually get some messages from our expedition to the east that Syracuse is now being besieged by Carthage, and it's currently owned by Rome. So the main thing to take away from that, though, is that these Roman upstarts are actually starting to become a major power in the region. It's a shame our rules for this head-to-head campaign do not allow us to get any diplomatic relations with Carthage or Rome, because now would be a good time. A few turns later, and we finally are assaulting Aplasia again. We're trying to do it before the enemy army has time to recover, and for the most part this has worked. We're going to auto-resolve the battle, but we're going to take some serious losses. It's going to be pretty rough, but at the end of the day, this auto-resolve being successful, which it is, means that we now control Aplasia. We basically control all of Iberia. Carthage has its holdings on the coastline still, and we have the Editani and Lusitani to the northeast, but both tribes are actually starting to become quite friendly with us, especially the Lusitani, who are allied to the Massalians. So, ladies and gentlemen, round of applause, we finally have Iberia under our control. Now it is time to figure out what to do next. Do we begin marching south, kicking the Carthaginian colonists out of Iberia and taking the land for ourselves? Maybe even go down and invade Africa? Or do we go north and begin driving against the Gallians or the Nervii, taking care of the Blue Walkers before they can come down and invade our homeland? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see what happens in the next episode. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.